You're everything I love in a woman. Beautiful, powerful, feminine, sensual, playful, sexual, organic, curly hair and mocha skin, speaks her own mind, holds her own aura. You know how to laugh. You also know how to cry. You carry the strength of an ancient soul, yet your vulnerabilities are so soft, like silk and satin upon my senses. My kind of woman.
Hey guys, and welcome to From My Lens podcast. Today I have a special guest and a friend. Her name is Valerie. Again, she's back on this podcast, but this time it's a little different. We're talking about her new launch of her book. And do you want to tell us what it is, Valerie?
Well, there are actually two books, Lovey.
Two books. Okay, there you go.
Books.
We got two books.
Yeah, we got two books, and I wrote them within 3 months.
Okay.
It's beautiful. It's all about, ancient love stories, poetries, awakening process, healing, which humanity needs. Humanity is going through that process. It's all about healing our traumas, our childhood wounds. It's just, and then again, it always goes back to love. Everything.
Amazing. I love that.
Always goes back to love. Yeah.
That's great. Now, I know, like, before we even dive in about the book and the strategy and how you came up with it, I wanted to ask you since when did you started to write? And I remember walking with you when we were somewhere in Vancouver, Stanley Park, and I remember talking about frequency, energy, consciousness, all and love, most importantly. And just after a conversation, I felt this higher vibration and I felt like literally so good, as if I just got a facelift, which is so weird to say, but it really felt so good, that 2 hours of conversation with you. Now, can you tell us a bit about energy frequency? Because I know you're a huge channeler like myself, and for a lot of my listeners who are listening, what is frequency and energy, and how do you actually channel?
The way my mind reasons with that is that frequencies are dimensions, and with the kind of line of mission work that I do, is that I channel from different dimensions and from different frequencies. So far, one of my biggest work has been working with the 8th dimension. So when we actually met, I was in that state of frequency of 8th dimension, which is what you were elevated into.
What is 8th dimension?
So what is 8th dimension? It's really, really interesting, actually. The way my mind sees it is really, really high frequency, and it's super, super light. For me to channel those frequencies then turn into energy. Energy is kind of basically where the knowledge are kind of stored, and that's how my system process them, and they're processed through the processing system of the chakras. So all of those are related. Your chakras has to be super cleansed, pretty much at a 0 point, in order to understand what those energies are, what they carry. And in order for my consciousness to plug into the 8th dimension, my whole body has to be very, very clean. That space is super, super light. Yeah. It's like for me, how I experience it is the only way for me to access that space is when I'm completely aligned with it and in its frequency field. So I can't access that unless my whole body is very, very clean and aligned with its frequency.
Right. Now, when you say clean and at a point zero, like, do you have to be, does it actually comes down to what you eat, what you drink? Just how does somebody
It
go
comes down to all of those different elements.
Okay.
So what you eat plays a big, huge part in this. Yeah. When I access those dimensions, I am instructed. Actually, I am instructed by these beautiful beings that I channel from that dimension themselves. So they do give me instructions as to what I need to do to prepare my body to travel in there. Because if I was just traveling from the state of where I am, where I've eaten food and access that, which sometimes it does happen, I notice a huge difference. It distorts the energy, the messages as well too. And that's a space where I don't want to work when I am in that space. I only would like to work on a space where if I'm channeling those frequencies, is when I am completely linked into it as my body should be. So that the messages that I am receiving are as clean and pure the way I would bring it down here and not distorted.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So do you eat as well? Like, or do you just do cleansing?
I just juice for those moments. So I would juice for like about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on the intensity of the work that I am being asked to involve myself into. Because, we have that free will to choose to, are you willing to do the work for it? And if you're willing to do the work, then are you willing to shift your the elements that's happening here in the physical space that we are in order to access those knowledge, those energies. Absolutely. And the kind of being that I am is that I was born for this. And there's always that truth.
I love how you said it. I was born for this. Yes.
Yes, I was. And that was something that was explained to them too, They explained that I was born for this, but it was kind of hard for me in the beginning to really adjust to that, because of, my storyline, where I come from or where I came from, So, so it took me a little bit to really adjust to those truths. And then, they put me into a process of really understanding that, yes, I was born for being who I am today. And that is where the power comes, is when you access that truth and you align with that truth. Right. And nothing else is going to stop you from that moment on. You just move forward with the creations that's there ready and available for you to create what needs to be created.
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, just to hop on to my next question. Like, I know you talked about cleansing, going to complete zero to really feel all these things, which I completely agree. And like, for somebody who probably does not juice or, probably drinks gallons of coffee a day, what advice would you give them in terms of like, because it's so hard to kind of, put yourself to that level where you can't completely cut off these things, just go cold turkey all of a sudden. But if somebody does want to practice mindfulness and frequencies, energy, and to kind of really feel that, what basic advice would you give them to kind of get started?
It's simply the willingness. It's as simple as that. You are given a choice all the time, it's a choice to choose to do that, or it's a choice to do what you really want to do. We are given those options and choices all the time. Those are not being taken from us. Those are not being controlled or anything in any way, shape, or form. From my experience, that is that, it's like you're given a choice of 2 paths, of 2 roads, left or right. It's always there in front of you at any given moment. And I
It's
see
like
it.
it's
I
your
see it.
choice to make that
Yeah, so it's
decision.
a choice to do that, and
Yeah.
the willingness to exist in that space.
Right. Now,
You know?
what inspired you to even step into this world of consciousness? Because I know you talked about, and I think you even talked about in my first podcast show that we did together, like from where you came from and how there was a huge adjustment that you had to do. Could you just kind of summarize that again for some of our new listeners? Like, what inspired you to even step into the conscious state of mind? Yeah.
It's when I start connecting with my channelers, with my guides, and listening to what they were saying and what they were communicating with me. In the beginning, it was really scary because you're hearing these voices that's channeling, giving you informations. And I didn't have a teacher about what these are, and so I went with my instinct. And there's always this part of me that, if what the messages are bad, then that's a different storyline altogether. But once I started listening to the messages, they were all about healing. They were all about me becoming more aware of my surroundings, of the trees, of the planets, and our cultures, our society. It was all about that. So then it made me really kind of get into my field of understanding that there's something else way bigger outside myself, or outside my thoughts, in terms of fear. Where I told myself, let's just go for the journey and see where it's going to take us. So that was the first time I dipped my toes, and I allowed myself to dip my toes into that without fear, in a way. I mean, there's always going to be that, because when you are moving into the unknown, you can't touch it. It's all based on feelings, and so I allowed myself to feel. And with that, I just moved forward. And when you're accessing those dimensions of yourself, you are going in my case, I was hit with many lifetimes of stories, and I saw myself in all of those storylines and what I went through, and I just went forward with that, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. So back to the question of inspiration. I don't think that I ever looked at it in a way where I was inspired, that I had an inspiration. I think for me, there was an unconscious state part of myself that was calling me to go deeper and deeper. And that was what was calling me. And that's what I followed. And so in a way, I guess that's what inspired me, is to understand and discover that unknown part of myself that was so strong that I craved to understand.
Yeah, definitely. So I know you talked about, how you dipped your toes and really went for it. Now, I kind of wanted to go back and ask you this one question, which is, when you dived into this consciousness and when they were talking to you, like, how did you even kind of know who they are, and who, like how is that connection? Like, what were they even actually saying? Who are they? Like, was that your conscious state of mind telling you, or was it like something much more higher than your conscious state of mind?
I knew it was something much way higher and farther than what I am made of. And so for me, it was instinct. Again, it's that choice. Fear is in the background, right?
Absolutely,
but there's that moment with myself where I listened to the fear. And I also listened to what they were communicating. And it's a choice of just simply shutting that door, or in my case, because it didn't make me feel scared, even though fear was there. it didn't make me feel scared. Something was familiar about it. You know, even though I was unconscious in that, you know, I was unawakened.
What made you actually take this path?
It was just basically a regular day, you know, coming from work, I believe, and suddenly something shifted in me. You know, that was when my Kundalini was being woken up. And so then that's where everything started. My Kundalini woke up, and then it started to do yoga for me. At that point, I have no idea what yoga is, pretty much, you know. So then again, those, you know, I kind of went through a really like fast, massive shift in a way where the Kundalini rising happened, the purging happened with the chakras, and then at the same time, they were also there communicating with me. So when all of these package all came all at once, so that's when I speak about, you know, the fear was there, you know, and it was me standing there in the silence and really adjusting myself to all that frequencies, all that dimensions that was being opened at the same time. And I tell myself, you know, how do they make me feel? What are they really communicating with me? And it was in the form of writing when they, you know, started communicating with me. And what I felt when they were communicating with me was gentleness and love. And so then that is what I followed with my instinct. And also what was coming out into the paper was basically messages of love for me, and them explaining themselves who they are. And you know, and for me, all those doors were so locked and shut
that you just had to kind of
I just allowed myself to follow what they were communicating with me. And so I just shifted. I followed the instructions. But yeah, because the instructions were, you know, logically, because I'm a very logical person too, you know, I reasoned with myself. The instructions is telling me to eat healthy. Right?
How were you at that point before? How were you before in terms of your, like, when you say they were helping you with love and all these things, and you know, love was the main thing. What kind of person were you before this whole process?
I was a loving person. That never shifted. Like me, where I was before to where I am today, it never shifted. It's the same thing, just more understanding where that is all coming from. That's where, you know. But I grew up, I came from a village, and I was surrounded with, you know, I knew as a child, when people say I knew when I was a child, something was different about me. I knew as a child, something was different about me because, you know, I was surrounded by, you know, lots of cousins and the neighbors' kids, and their interests were very, very different from mine, you know, and I was more about like.
You knew that right away.
Yeah, and I was like, really, when I would look into my surroundings, the culture in my village, it was like I could tell something else was looking behind my eyes as a child. And I could tell that I wasn't thinking as a 4-year-old, because I could tell that my frame of thoughts were very, very much more at like an older type of thinking, almost ancient. And I was seeing all of these. Then I moved to Vancouver, and all of that shut down. I was 11 years old when I moved to Vancouver. Then that all shut down. I guess it was, they call it culture shock, which I didn't realize.
Culture shock, society, everything,
But it was also because of how the city lifestyle was. I came from an organic lifestyle, you know, where I had freedom to roam my village into the fields and go to the river. You know, you had all of this freedom, you know, just to go to the woods, climb trees. Pretty much the first thing that I heard when I landed in Vancouver, when I could finally understand English, was that you're not allowed to climb trees.
You're not allowed to do anything.
Yeah, which then to me that shocked my whole entire core system, because that was my passion as a child, was climb trees. So then that's where things started to kind of like, I felt my world shut down. You know, that part of yourself where you're so adventurous kind of like just shut down.
Imagine that sense of culture shock and, you know, society putting different ideologies in you and, you know, trying to maneuver you. So I could definitely see that. And it's almost like what happened, just to reiterate what you said, it's almost like you finally, all of that was already there in the beginning when you were a kid. And when you moved, you know, all these things kind of played a different game. And finally, at a right time, right day, it all snapped.
It just all snapped. It just snapped. Yeah, like that was, I think, 10 years ago. I want to say 10 years ago, pretty much. And one day I came home, and then it's like these beings just suddenly started kind of communicating with me. And my Kundalini started to rise, and my chakra started to shift and move and purge. It was all about purging.
I feel it's so important to be conscious of your surroundings, of more than that, of yourself first. And all these portals will eventually open, which we have closed and locked for so long. And that also goes down to anybody who has not listened to the first episode we did together, definitely listen to that, because that's something we talked about, like about purging, about energy exchange and things like that. So definitely tune into that. But I wanted to also talk to you now based on your new book. So what inspired you to like write poems and find inspiration?
Writing poems has always been there the whole time. It's almost like my core of writing, because I write from my soul, and my soul is a poet. So most of my writings is comes from there. Inspirations is they come from the elements of where I am in my life. And the last two books was about a beautiful woman that I met, and I wrote about her.
Right.
And I wrote about our process and the elements that kind of played in that space. And so, yeah, the type of writer that I am, when I'm simply in that writing space, I can write a book in a month. And that seems to be a trajectory of the way how I write. And because I write from the soul,
right,
I simply let my soul write what it needs to write. And I simply am the physical embodiment of bringing it into this physical reality. So I find writing to be very simple for me. Sometimes what is hard is actually when we are faced with those emotions that we sometimes don't want to admit with ourselves. And I have become braver with that. Last night I went to sleep, and what came to my thought was something so beautiful. And the thought was, it is so beautiful to be truthful.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, and so that is where I have arrived in my journey. And I do write in my books a lot about, freeing your voice, because as we move forward in life, it's all about, in society where we are now, it seems things are closing.
Yeah.
And and
that's a whole different topic in a podcast.
Yeah. But my point to that is that it's now also about blooming.
Right. Absolutely.
And allowing your own truth to basically come out and let it
flourish.
Let it bloom.
Yeah.
The best way you can express yourself. you know, the
Right.
most beautiful way you can express that. Yeah.
So that's amazing that all of that really ignited, inspired you, and especially a woman, you know. And if you don't mind us sharing, what inspired you to come up with, uh, name of your book called "The Beautiful Oasis of Loving a Woman"? Was that
Again, it's it's all in the process of in those creations. I'm very attentive to how the storylines are forming themselves. So I listen to the different layers and depths of those elements. For me, it's all about elements, right?
right?
And the depths of those elements, and I break them down, right? But the titles just comes. The thing is, for me, I've now gotten to that realization that the type of writer that I am, everything is there for me. I just have to stitch them. All the puzzle pieces are hovering, and it's up to me to pick them up and make them into a puzzle. And so my writing style is basically very free flow, and it's also based on my emotions as well too. So they just write themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I just
Yeah.
channel them.
So what I love about your sense of writing, what inspires me to continue to work on the book that I'm working on, is to allow myself to really be free and really, really just let it flow naturally instead of controlling it so much.
Yes, and also too, when you're in that space, even the words themselves, when you tell myself, I'll be like, oh, I should use this word. It's
Yeah.
like it doesn't function. So these are the things
Exactly.
that I learned from the very beginning, and then that's when I let. Also, I noticed that the hand carries so much wisdom and knowledge,
Yes.
and so I let the hand do it all.
Yeah.
Even at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm sleeping,
You'll just wake
I
up.
have my book underneath my bed. I pull it out and I let my hand write in the
Wow.
dark, you know. And so in the morning, I know that I have it written out. And so, you know, writing is a beautiful tool to heal yourself, to
Mhm.
discover about who you are, and also there are many keys and ingredients in there
Yeah.
as how to we can also heal the world in itself,
Right.
and that comes through writing.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you share top 2 quotes or poem from your book?
It's basically from my book called Flower Inferno in the Valleys of Lavender Meadows.
Ooh, lovely.
The consciousness of flowers blooming seductively, like codes that the gods keep on pouring onto my body. Glory does not taste sweet when my arms are empty. When you are the embodiment of my spirituality, you are the skin and bones of my realities. I shake my head at these emotions I want to abandon. But they are these dimensions I can't get out of. For my whole existence is to come and love you, love you, love you. But, oh, but I mourn because you won't let me.
Wow.
And the title of this passage is called Soul Fatigue.
Soul fatigue, guys.
Yeah.
All right. This is incredible. I have to get my hands on this book. Yeah, I think that's so cool, Valerie. I'm so proud of you because I know we were talking and then you kind of went MIA for about a few months, or probably almost a year. But you know what? I think it's incredible because you're working on something, you're not talking about it, and then suddenly, boom, you've done it, you did it, and now you're out here, I think it's just so incredible. So definitely what you've done is it's huge, it's amazing, and I'm so proud of you.
Well, thank you. And I'm also so proud of you too, from what you're doing at your other end and your work, your creativity, and you are also shifting since the last time you and I have had a conversation.
Yes.
Um, you've shifted a lot, and I see it and I feel it, which I'm so happy for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you. I'm definitely trying, and I'm just in a process. And I think what's amazing about humans and of just us and channelers and stuff that today you're something, but tomorrow it's like we're always evolving, we're changing,
Yeah,
you
we
know.
are always evolving,
Yeah. And
and if we
that's
don't
amazing.
evolve,
Then you're
that
stuck.
hurts. Yeah, if we don't evolve, that really hurts, I have to
That
say,
hurts. It
yeah, it
does.
hurts. And
And a
even
lot of
that I will, yeah, and even that I will write about it.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. And also, I know we talked about freedom and how um all of that. I think we should definitely do a third episode based on that. I think that would be incredible. How when people talk about free will, actually, that's one thing I really want to talk about because I know we have some time. And if that's okay with you,
Definitely.
just to kind of summarize this, what does free will mean to you?
Free will to me is quite simple, actually. It is about allowing yourself to express yourself in your creative process.
Right. Hmm. Um, so can you kind of go a little deeper than that? Because I
So
feel there's more to it.
when you allow yourself to express yourself in your creative process,
Mhm.
that in itself holds such a deep power, because you are freeing yourself in that moment with, millenniums of trauma,
Right.
of being caged. And there's something to be said about simply allowing yourself to express yourself in that sense. Um, in that space, when you're allowing yourself to be just in your creative, sacred space, you are shedding, those layers. You're healing those layers that has bound you, by culture, by family, by society, by history. You
Yep, you
know,
said it.
yeah. So it's healing. It's healing those wounds when you're
Yeah.
doing that, and that's where you can start freeing yourself.
Funny that you say that. I was talking to one of my clients today, something very similar, obviously not profoundly as the way you put it, but I told her that it's almost like if we don't heal ourselves, we are letting our past ancestors and generations of traumas carry it forward to the future. And with this whole pandemic, this whole thing that's just happened, or this whole thing had really kind of stopped. Obviously, um, aside from the negatives, let's look at the positives. It allowed us to also heal from things from the past, you know, to get that courage and that sense of, to be able to um, cut things that needed to be cut off, you know, to be that you needed to flee yourself from. So it's almost like all the chains from the past that you were holding on to from the generations. It's almost like it's time to just break that and free yourself from that. So that's what I got out of what you just said.
Exactly. This time that we are being given
Mhm.
is basically a reset for humanity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for those who are willing, we go back to the willing, the willingness, and the choice to really look into yourself you know, because
Right.
everything does begin from the self, you know,
Definitely.
and see what is working and what is not working, and your willingness to work on those and see yourself. I'm also all about understanding your light
Right.
and your dark, you
Definitely.
know, and that's where I gather a lot of my writings from,
Mhm.
is from me witnessing myself both in my light and in my dark, and to really um, acknowledge those existence in me
Right.
and understand them for what they play in my life.
That's amazing. And I think anybody who is listening to this should, have the courage. We should have the courage really to acknowledge that in our lives, to allow ourselves to do that, because really we we are the we are the we are the ones who can free ourselves and trap ourselves. But what happens is, what society does to us is we end up blaming things outside instead of looking at, on the inside. And that's what happens. So, yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. And, once again, I'm so happy to have you back on this podcast after this incredible journey you were on, and, your incredible book, which I cannot wait to get my hands on. And for anybody who's listening, please check out Valery Dayrit's new book called The Beautiful Oasis of Loving a Woman.